Hello, it's Marley. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my June reading wrap up. So it is officially the last day of June. So let's talk about all the books that I read in the month. I read so many 4-star books. So many of these books are 4 stars. I don't know what was up with this month. But yeah, as always, let's go through some of my stats for the month, just a little overview of my reading. I'm gonna look at the ones I track, and then I thought it might be good to pull up Storygraph because it's been a while since I looked at the Storygraph stats and saw what they had to offer over there. I did read 10 books this month, so we finally broke the little 7 and 8 book average that I've been having. Not by like a crazy amount, but still happy to have read 10 books, and I did catch up on my Goodreads goal because I kept being behind the whole year. That equated to about 2,027 pages and 18 listening hours. I actually listened to a couple audiobooks this month. My average rating was 3.75, pretty typical for me and most readers, I feel. Books acquired was 7, which is still quite a lot. I'm definitely gonna have a lot of books to pull out and talk about from my spring summer book haul. And then 2 of the books I read I consider own voices. In terms of the genres, we do have a pretty good mix here. 30% of the books I read were thrillers and 30% were fantasy, so 3 each. And then we did 2 romance books, one that I considered contemporary and one that I considered horror. In terms of format, I alluded to this before, but 6 of the books that I read were physical, and then 2 were audio and 2 were ebook. All of the books I read this month were adult books, no YA. And a little bit of a different stat for me, or a different result, is that half of the books I read were from female authors and half were from male authors. Typically, I always read way more female authors. I think part of that is probably because it was June and I was trying to read queer books. So I feel like some of the books I read were from male queer authors, potentially. In terms of the new to me or repeat author ratio, 8 of the books that I read were repeat authors and only 2 were new to me authors. And then in terms of year published, 4 of the books I read were from this year, which makes sense because I did a reading vlog where I read new release books. 1 was from last year in 2024, 2 were from 2023, then we go down to 1 from 2021 and 2 from 2020. That was the oldest book. And then if we check in on books I've read, or books I've bought, and how many of them I've read. So I've read 59% of the books that I bought, which I feel is not too bad because I've read over half of the books I bought. It's just not bad. And so far I've spent $388 on books. Now looking at Storygraph, it's going to be pretty similar, but the way they divide the books is by moods, which is a little different than genre. So my top 3 moods are dark, tense, and mysterious, which kind of makes sense because I do really like thrillers, although I don't feel like I've been reading that many thrillers this year, so it is a bit weird. Then emotional and then hopeful are the next biggest moods. In terms of pace, 60% of the books I've read have been medium pace, 20% have been fast, and then 20% have been slow, so pretty balanced there. In terms of page number, 70% of the books I've read, sorry, this is for June, I don't know if I said that, just June, have been between 300 and 500 pages, pretty typical, and then just 30% were less than 300 pages. All fiction, and then it does have a genre breakdown. So according to Storygraph, I read 4 books that are considered horror, 3 that are considered LGBT, 3 thriller, 3 romance, 3 mystery, 3 fantasy, 3 contemporary. So clearly they combine genres. Oh, so that's why the moods is so dark. When I was talking about that, I was thinking the whole year, but no, it makes sense if I read so many horror books to be dark, tense, and mysterious. And yeah, the same average ratings, but in this graph you can see more of the breakdown that I had 6 4-star reads, 3 3.5 stars, and 1 3-star. All right, let's just get into the book reviews now, starting with my lowest rated book leading up to my highest rated, although the top 6 are all 4 stars, but I'm still gonna try to put them in the order of like my least favorite to my favorite, even though they have the same rating. So first of all, I read volume 4 and 5 of Hell's Paradise. This is a manga series by Yuji Kaku. This is a pretty like dark kind of horror manga. Those are the ones that I prefer rather than like the fluffy cute ones. I gave the first I give the 4th volume 3 stars and then the 5th volume 3.5, so I liked it a little bit more. Basically the premise of this is that a bunch of assassins, a bunch of criminals are forced to go on this island, and they're kind of tasked with the mission of finding the elixir of life or elixir of youth, basically a way to like stay immortal. Our main character, we find out a little bit more about him. He's like a really famous killer. Don't ask me to say any of the characters' names, sorry, but yeah, he basically is the main focus, and he wants to like, I think, go back to like his wife or something. Anyway, so we've been following a bunch of these characters on this island. There's a bunch of weird stuff going on the island, a bunch of monsters that they're having to defeat. It's cool, but you can clearly tell it's written by a man. Like a lot of stuff is kind of like unneeded in terms of like nudity and things like that. It wasn't as bad in these volumes, but there is just something I feel a little bit off about the series. Like, I'm not obsessed with it, obviously, with the ratings that I've had, but I do still think it's kind of interesting. I think I rated volume 5 a bit higher because it focused on characters I cared about more. We're just getting so many characters that is a little overwhelming, especially for me who's reading the series like very broken up. I'm not just like binging it, so I'm kind of forgetting who the characters are. We also got a reveal in this section that I thought was a little bit lame, so yeah, I'll probably still continue until I start like actually hating it, then maybe I would stop. But yeah, this is kind of a dark like fantasy horror manga. Okay, then I read 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. This was not on my TBR. I just randomly picked up this audiobook because I've been trying to go on more walks this summer since the weather's nice, and so I just wanted to listen to an audiobook. So this is a thriller that I remember hearing about a few years ago because it's actually based in COVID, like during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's like the most interesting thing about it, to be honest. But it's about specifically this girl who meets this guy, and they kind of start seeing each other while like the beginning of the pandemic is starting, and then they decide to actually move in together when they're being told that they need to, you know, isolate, you know, during that time when you weren't supposed to interact with other households. So since they're just sort of getting to know each other and don't have anyone else super close to them, because they both had just recently moved to Dublin, Ireland, so they're like, let's just live together during this isolation period. They thought it was going to only be like 2 weeks, right? Like we all thought. And then we're having different timelines. So we're seeing that kind of current timeline of those two people getting to know each other. But then we're also seeing in the future from a police officer or detective's point of view. And we know that something happened in this apartment, that someone has ended up dead. And so we're going back and forth between the two, finding out different information and like what is going to go down between these two people. So that was definitely interesting. But as I said, I think the most interesting thing was kind of hearing about the COVID stuff. Like it's been, you know, 5 years, I guess. So I feel like I had thankfully forgotten about it a little bit. Just hearing about that again, like, oh, lining up for the grocery store, a limited amount of people allowed to go in, the 6 feet apart distancing, like such an upsetting time to be reminded of. But there were some interesting reveals. Like, I don't want to reveal it obviously in this video, but you do hear from both of the people's perspectives and you're wondering like, what is going on here exactly? The book definitely does things to purposely fool you, purposely keep things from you. But yeah, overall I did like it. I gave it 3.5 stars. So not a favorite, but glad that I read it. The audiobook was pretty decent. I feel like maybe I listened to it a little too fast. I increased the speed a little too much. I'm still figuring out my preferences for audiobooks. If you've been watching my channel, you know. So I think I listened to it a little too fast where I wasn't able to catch everything. So yeah, don't read this if you're still triggered and traumatized by COVID, but it was a pretty easy to read thriller book. All right, and the other book I rated 3.5 stars is Stars in Your Eyes by Kacen Callender. This is one of the books I read for Pride Month because it is a queer book. So Kacen Callender, he's written a couple books before that I've really enjoyed. This one, I guess, would be my least favorite one by him that I've read so far. Still, overall, liked it, but we'll get into the issues. So, really, really great premise to start out. Oh, I should look up the character names to remember. Okay, Logan and Maddie. Okay, we see from both of the two main characters' points of view, Logan and Maddie, they have both got cast in this gay rom-com. Logan has been a child actor his whole life. They're now adults. But he's always been in the spotlight and he's very talented, but he is known as kind of like a bad boy, getting into drugs and partying and stuff. Then we have Maddie, who's like a newer actor on the scene. He just had like one other major role so far, but he's still pretty green to acting. So they get casted in this movie together and they really do not get off on the right foot at all, mostly because of Logan being kind of a dick. But then the producers tell them, hey, we need you to fake date to kind of get some good publicity surrounding the movie because of what Logan has caused in a lot of the bad publicity. So we have a fun little like kind of enemies to lovers, fake dating, forced proximity thing. Really, really fun. For the first part of the book, we're seeing a lot of them filming the movie, a lot of them on set, just getting to know each other, realizing they're not who they thought they were. They kind of like misjudged each other to start. Really, really cute premise. For the second half of the book, I guess, it gets very dark. And I did know this going in. I had heard this, so I was a bit mentally prepared for it, but it deals a lot with essays, especially like against children, as you can imagine, with it talking about Hollywood. So I kind of think it was good, I guess, that Kacen focused on that, because obviously that's a huge issue in Hollywood, unfortunately, that we have been learning about as a society. But for like a romance that started out with such a cute premise, I feel like it went so hard into the trauma of everything, and it honestly was triggering. Like there were a few scenes that were quite upsetting to read. So if you're gonna read this, like definitely be prepared for that. There are trigger warnings, you know, in the beginning that the author put in. But yeah, it just was like a little too dark, like especially when the first part of the book was so good and like more of a lighthearted tone. Just to go into that like darkness for the rest of the book, it was a lot. So I still liked it, but it was just like a little too much for me, you know? Okay, now we enter into all my 4-star reads. The first one we have is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. I actually read this for that reading blog where I read new release books from some of my favorite authors. I think this was the very first book I read this month, so honestly not the best memory of this, but I did overall like it, obviously, because I gave it 4 stars. It is about a man who's on the phone with his wife. She's on her way home, and then he literally hears her like disappear. She pulls over to the side of the road. She's like, I see someone in the middle of the road, I'm gonna go help them. So she goes and then she disappears. Her car is just found there. She's never seen again. And so this guy is really going through a hard time. He's grieving his wife. We skip forward a year and see that he has been, you know, having such a difficult time. He is a writer, an author, and he has just not been able to write because he's so upset. So his agent is like, hey, I have access to this little cute house in the Scottish Highlands. You can go there, just focus on writing and recovering and whatnot. So he goes there and then he starts seeing his wife. He starts thinking that he sees her, you know, on the ferry over on the street. Like he doesn't know if this is really her and she's been here on this island this whole time, or like if he's just hallucinating and if he's like an unreliable narrator kind of thing. So I did like this one. I feel like the ominous vibes were good, this creepy island. I do think a lot of the plot kind of became very obvious as we were reading, and then it does get a little bit unbelievable by the end, but I'm someone who likes that kind of thing. I like crazy twists. So I overall did like it, but definitely not a 5-star read or anything. Definitely not my favorite book from Alice Feeney. I feel like she does have some repetitive things in her books where maybe if you've read one, you just won't be surprised for the other ones. I think that's kind of what's happening now. Still like it, so if you're a fan of Alice, you could check this one out. Another book I read this month, this was the other audiobook, and it was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. So I've heard a few people talk about this book recently, which got me intrigued. I know it was like a sapphic horror, so again, that's why I picked it up for Pride Month. So in this we have our main character, Ro. She's living in this cute little small town. She is a professor at the local college, and she goes to this like Saturday farmers market kind of thing and meets this girl named Ash, and she runs her own, you know, booth. She sells a bunch of yummy food and things that she makes and plants and all these things that she kind of grows and makes at home. Ro has never been into women before, but suddenly she gets this like obsessive crush, infatuation on Ash. She is like always going to visit her on Saturdays at the market, and then they just start this romance together. But there's always this like vibe where you're like, what creepy, weird thing is gonna happen because you know it's a horror. If you're like me and you heard other reviews from people, you know that it gets weird. So a lot of it is not a ton of crazy things happening. It's just like the lead up to whatever you know is going to get revealed closer to the end. And based on a lot of the descriptions and stuff, like I feel like it was pretty obvious where it was going to go, but it was still pretty entertaining to read, like the lead up to it, having all these kind of red flags going on with Ro and Ash. The big reveal definitely was crazy, even though it was a bit predictable, as I said. Definitely worth a read. I don't read a ton of horror books, so again, I feel like every time I read one, I do appreciate how they are quite different from the other books I read, right? Like thrillers or romance or anything. So yeah, I'm having a good time with horror every time I check it out. This one, definitely like body horror kind of stuff. But again, it's not really till the end. So it's not like you're like constantly having to read about like gross stuff or anything. Yeah, honestly, I would overall recommend this for anyone who wants to maybe even have like an introduction more to horror. I feel like it's a pretty like accessible book because it's kind of romantic at times, I guess. And yeah, the horror doesn't pick up to the end. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I got out of my comfort zone a little bit and read this. All right, next up, I read An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This is the author of A Dowry in Blood, which is a 5-star book for me. That first book was like a horror romance, and this is pretty similar. I think I marked this down as a fantasy, but it technically is kind of like romance horror as well. It is a Carmilla retelling, which I didn't love the book Carmilla, the classic, but I actually had such a fun time reading this like adaptation of that story. So obviously we're following Laura and Carmilla. Both of them get point of views in this book. Laura just transfers to this university, all girls, because this takes place I think in the 60s. She's like quite innocent so far in her life. Like the most scandalous thing she does is, I guess, read smut, basically, but she's had a pretty, like, average life so far. She's really into poetry. That's, like, the main thing she's studying there, and Carmilla is in her class, and her and Laura kind of become rivals, so that was a very fun dynamic, because Carmilla is used to being, like, the best student in the poetry class, and then Laura comes in and kind of challenges her, and they have a little bit of a rivalry to be the favorite of their teacher. Definitely kind of content warnings for inappropriate relationships with your teacher, as that's kind of Carmilla's storyline that she's going through. It's not a huge spoiler, but I thought it was interesting that Carmilla is not a vampire to start off the book, which I'm pretty sure she is in the Carmilla classic. So yeah, then you just keep following them as they get to know each other more, have more feelings for each other. It is sapphic, don't know if I've said that, and then they just get wrapped up in some bloody vampire drama together. I just thought it was a really fun time. I feel like not a lot of people have enjoyed it as much as I did, but if any of these kind of buzzwords are your buzzwords, like, I think you should check it out. The school setting, dark academia vibes, you could say, the rivals to lovers, bloody vampire stuff. It was just very good. The ending, I don't know. Maybe the ending could have... No, actually I feel like it did. I didn't mind the ending. Oh, my ring light went out. I've been rambling too much. Okay, we'll just continue without the ring light. I feel like it's fine. Anyways, moral of the story, I liked this. Glad that I bought it, and I'll probably keep reading from S.T. Gibson. Another book I read for that new release reading vlog is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. So you can go check out that vlog if you want to see more of my in real time thoughts on these books. But yeah, obviously I have really loved Fredrik Backman. He is a Swedish author, and he writes like literary fiction books. So in this one, we have our main character, Louisa. She's like, I think 18-year-old girl. She's been an orphan, so she's been growing up in foster care and everything. And the one thing she had from her mom is this postcard, and on the back it was this painting of the sea, and there were a few friends swimming in the sea or sitting on a dock, I think. So she's always been kind of obsessed with this painting. We see her basically just kind of go investigate. She wants to see this painting in real life, and she wants to learn about the people that are in the painting. She honestly feels like they are her friends as well, because she's just been looking at this painting her whole life. And so she does end up getting to meet the people in the painting, learn about their past. The main part of the book is having flashbacks to those characters. I think there's 4 friends, specifically focusing on this one summer that they had together as friends when I think they were 14. There is a lot of upsetting things that do go on in this book. Be aware of that. All of these kids are growing up in not very good situations in terms of their parents' abuse, being poor, things like that. But it is very heartwarming at the end of the day. Of course. You know you're gonna get that with Fredrik Backman. Heartbreaking things, but also very heartwarming things. As I think I said before, not my favorite from him, unfortunately. I feel like his writing style can get a little bit repetitive as well, similar to Alice Feeney, where it's like maybe the first book you read from him, like Anxious People for me, I was obsessed with his kind of writing style. And then I think as you get to read more from him, you're kind of like, okay, he's doing the same kind of gimmicks over and over. That being said, still liked it. And even though it's quite thick, like I don't think it would take you that long to get through it. Be a good book to read in the summer months with the setting and everything. So yeah, also maybe if you're into art, drawing, painting, you also might have a special interest in this one. Next up, we have With a Vengeance by Riley Sager. I think my previous video before this one was my spoiler reading vlog for this book. So if you've read it and want to see all my spoilery thoughts and my review, you can go check that out. But here's for the non-spoilery people. So I gave it 4 stars, obviously. This is about, is her name Anna? Should remember. Yeah, Anna. So years ago, her family was destroyed. You don't know why at the very beginning. You know that these like 6 people caused it. So she does this whole big scheme where she invites these 6 people onto a train. She buys out like all the rest of the tickets. So it's literally just her little helper, Seamus, and then these people who have destroyed her life. She doesn't want to kill them or anything like that. She just wants them to like face their crimes, justice be served, that kind of thing. But then one of the people on the train gets murdered. So her plan goes off the rails, and now she actually has to try to figure out who the killer is and protect these people that have destroyed her life. So yeah, ultimately I did like this book, but I will say this is probably one of the slowest Riley Sager books for me. Normally I am in it from the jump, obsessed with his writing, very intrigued, coming up with all these different theories of what I think is going on. And I was still trying to come up with theories, but it just felt a lot slower. Like the first murder didn't happen till I think it was 100 pages in. So it was kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to be trying to guess when I don't even know who's gonna die? It just felt very straightforward for the first part because you do find out what the incident is that destroyed Anna's family, like very clear cut. And it takes a while to get into this tension and action of this plot and the murders that are happening. Now, by the last third, I was in it. I was definitely having multiple different theories. A lot was going on, a lot more action and craziness. So I did ultimately like that. But yeah, just be warned, it is a bit of a slower start. And yeah, just not one of his standout books. Obviously, there's been a number of books from him I've rated 5 stars or 4.5. So this is not one of my favorites, but it's also not one of my least favorites. In case you don't know, Final Girls and Middle of the Night were probably my least favorites. Home Before Dark and The Only One Left are probably my most favorite. So just to give you a sense, this is like in the middle for me, if you're wondering if you want to read it or not. Yeah, just kind of a decent average thriller, but unfortunately did not live up to the hype that I was hoping from Riley. And then what would probably be my favorite book of the month is going to be Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, the third book I read in that new release reading vlog. So I'm going to describe this more as a literary fiction novel. I think the reason a lot of people haven't been loving this book is because they think it's going to be a typical romance, like something like her previous release, Funny Story, was. But this has kind of 2 different storylines going on. There's the main one with Alice, and she is a reporter, and she is trying to win the chance to tell the story of this famous starlet heiress, Margaret. So she's in a little bit of a competition with this man named Hayden. He's another reporter who wants to tell the story. And so both of them are trying to convince Margaret that they should be given the chance to write her biography. Then, of course, we are seeing Margaret's story. So all the way back from like her great grandpa, figuring out how her family got rich from the start, and then seeing her life, the true story behind what the press always thought they knew. I actually quite liked the romance part of this book. The 2 main characters are obviously rivals to start and don't really get along. It's also Grumpy Sunshine, which is a favorite trope of mine. So I really liked seeing that dynamic, and I really like seeing their relationship progress. Even though they kind of got together quick compared to some other books, I still didn't really mind that. I still liked seeing them together. In terms of Margaret's storyline, that disappointed me a little bit more. I wanted it to be juicier. I feel like they were hyping up her story so much, like like, oh, what's the truth gonna be? And then it was like, okay, I'm not that shocked by it. Like, it was no Evelyn Hugo, you know what I mean? That being said, still wasn't bad. Still liked how Emily weaved in the two kind of main timelines together. A couple things did surprise me, even though a lot of things didn't. And it was just really beautiful by the end, as the title alludes to. It's definitely one of those books that will have you kind of choking up at the end, because it is very beautiful about, you know, life and about family. So I would just say be mentally prepared for that. Like, it's not just going to be your pure romance. Like, you definitely can go check out other authors if you want that, but I think it's pretty well known that Emily Henry has a lot of like literary aspects to her books, not just romance, a lot of other themes that have to do with like family stuff, personal growth, and then this one, you know, the history of a family. So yeah, be aware of that, but it's still a good book. Like, anyone hating on it, like, I feel bad. I feel bad for Emily. Like, this is not a bad book. So yeah, so that is my June wrap up. Let me know if you have any thoughts on these books. Did I convince you to read any of them? Overall, I feel like it was a good reading month, even though it's too bad we didn't have any 5 stars in there, but 6 4-stars is not bad. So yeah, let me know how your month of reading went, and be sure to subscribe for more bookish videos from me in the future. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon in my next video. Bye!